Tonight, before you pick up your rosary beads, there is something Padre Pio said you must hear first. Because he watched it happen in his confessional more times than he could count. A devout woman would come to him carrying her beads, proud of her daily rosary, faithful in her practice, consistent in her prayers, and Padre Pio would look at her soul and see something that made him grieve. Not because she was skipping prayer, not because she was faithless, but because she was doing something that Padre Pio called, using precise theological language, a pure sacrilege. She was praying the rosary while holding hatred in her heart. And he had to tell her that the Our Lady she was addressing was turning away from those beads, not from her, from the prayer that was being offered in hatred's shadow. That is what this video is about. And if you pray the rosary, and I hope you do, you need to stay with me until the end, because there is a detail in Padre Pio's teaching that changes everything about how the rosary works, and why it sometimes seems to work not at all. I'm Margaret Ashford. I have prayed the rosary my entire adult life, and I confess to you with no small amount of shame that there were years when I prayed it faithfully every evening while carrying, in some chamber of my heart I did not fully examine, a stubborn and persistent resentment towards someone I told myself I had forgiven. I did not know then what Padre Pio knew. I did not understand what was happening spiritually each time I kissed the crucifix and began the creed with that hidden coldness still alive inside me. I understand it now. And what I am about to share with you comes not from my own spiritual authority, I have none, but from the documented testimonies of the priests and friars who lived alongside Padre Pio, studied his teachings, and preserved his words for those of us who came after. Begin with this. Before you pray your rosary tonight, sit quietly for one moment and ask yourself honestly, is there anyone in my life, anyone at all, toward whom I'm carrying something heavier than indifference? An old wound, a fresh anger, a resentment that has been there so long it feels like furniture. Because what Padre Pio discovered, and what the Vatican archives partially document, and what his spiritual directors recorded in detail, is that the answer to that question matters enormously for what happens when you begin to pray. Hold on, because what I'm about to share from the archives of San Giovanni Rotondo will reframe everything you think you know about the power of the Rosary. In the autumn of 1953, a woman came to Padre Pio's confessional. She was known to the friars at San Giovanni Rotondo as a woman of deep piety. She came to Mass daily. She led the rosary in her parish on Thursday evenings. She was considered by her community a model of Catholic devotion, and she came to Padre Pio's confessional not because she believed she had any serious sin to confess, but because she had been hearing that Padre Pio could see the soul. And she was curious, perhaps slightly proud, to know what he would see in hers. What happened next was recorded by the friar who served as Padre Pio's assistant that season, and his account is preserved among the documents held by the Capuchin friars of that community. Padre Pio listened as the woman knelt and began her confession. She listed small sins, the ordinary failings of a devout life, and then she fell silent, satisfied that she had offered everything. Padre Pio did not absolve her immediately. He was quiet for a moment, and then he asked her, "Do you have a sister?" She said yes. He asked, "When did you last speak to her?" The woman paused. She said it had been some years. He asked, "Why?" Another pause. She said there had been a disagreement, something about a family inheritance. Words had been exchanged that could not be taken back, and her sister, in the woman's account, had been entirely in the wrong. Padre Pio asked a final question. He asked, "On the Thursday evenings when you lead the rosary in your parish, what do you pray for your sister?" The woman said, "I pray that God will show her her error." Padre Pio did not raise his voice. He never did. But he said something that the assisting friar preserved word for word in his account. "You are not praying the rosary. You are performing a ceremony. Our Lady does not receive a prayer offered from a closed heart. You are placing beads between you and God and calling it devotion. It is not devotion. It is the appearance of devotion covering a wound that you refuse to allow grace to heal. Until the wound is addressed, your beads are beautiful, and they are empty. The woman reportedly wept. She had led that Thursday rosary for 11 years. I want you to sit with what Padre Pio said for a moment, because it is not a minor correction. He was not saying she was a bad person. He was not condemning her piety. He was saying something specific and theologically precise, that the rosary, as a form of prayer, requires something of the heart before it can function as it was designed to function. And what it requires is not perfection. It is not the absence of all struggle. It is the open heart, the heart that is, at minimum, willing to be healed. Padre Pio used a phrase that Father Agostino recorded several times in his diary of their conversations. He spoke of the prayer that rises and the prayer that falls. He said that most prayers, even imperfect ones, rise. They reach the intercession of the saints. They pass through Our Lady's hands. They arrive before God. But certain prayers, he said, fall. They are spoken, they are genuine in their outward form, and they fall back. They do not rise. And the most common reason a prayer falls, according to what Padre Pio taught, is that the one praying is simultaneously in the interior of the heart, maintaining a judgment, a resentment, or a contempt toward another soul made in the image of God. Why does this cause the prayer to fall? Padre Pio explained it using imagery from the Our Father, the prayer that Christ himself gave us, the prayer that is prayed at every Mass, the prayer that is woven into the Rosary itself. He pointed to those 6 words that most Catholics have prayed thousands of times without fully absorbing their weight. As we forgive those who trespass against us. He said that those words are not a description, they are a condition. They are not saying God forgives us the same way we forgive others as a parallel fact. They are saying God forgives us to the degree, in proportion to, the degree to which we extend that same mercy to others. This is not Margaret Ashford's interpretation. It is what Christ taught, what the Church has always held, and what Padre Pio made concrete and personal in his confessional. He told people that every time they prayed the Our Father with an unforgiven wound in their heart, they were asking God to withhold forgiveness from them in proportion to what they were withholding from others. They were, unknowingly, praying against themselves. Wait, because this is where it gets more disturbing and more important. Now let me take you deeper into the historical record, because what the Vatican archives contain, in the documents produced during the investigation into Padre Pio's life in preparation for his beatification, reveals something about this teaching that is not commonly known, even among devout Catholics. During the long process of investigating Padre Pio's holiness, the Church collected hundreds of testimonies from people who had known him, confessed to him, or been directed by him spiritually. Among those testimonies is a significant cluster that relates to what the investigators called the problem of sacramental obstruction, the question of how a person's interior spiritual state affects the validity and efficacy of the sacraments and devotional practices they perform. The testimony that is most relevant to what we are discussing today comes from a priest named Father Benedetto Nardella, who served as one of Padre Pio's early spiritual directors and maintained a correspondence with him spanning many years. In that correspondence, portions of which were preserved and examined during the beatification process, Padre Pio writes about something he calls the double prayer. He describes encountering, in confession after confession, people who are simultaneously engaged in what he calls a prayer of the lips and a counter-prayer of the heart. The prayer of the lips is the rosary, the novena, the litany, the formal devotional practice, sincerely intended and genuinely performed. The counter-prayer of the heart is the continuous, low-level spiritual activity of resentment, judgment, and withheld mercy. The interior life that runs parallel to the vocal prayer and, Padre Pio says, neutralizes it. He uses a striking image in one of these letters. He writes that the person who prays the rosary while maintaining hatred toward a neighbor is like someone who fills a vessel with water through one channel and drains it through another simultaneously. The vessel never fills. The prayer never accumulates. The grace that should build with each Hail Mary drains away through the open wound of the unforgiven offense. Father Benedetto, reading this letter, wrote back asking Padre Pio whether this meant that such a person's rosary was entirely without value. And Padre Pio's response is important. It is not a condemnation, and it is not a dismissal of the prayer. He writes, "Our Lady receives what she can receive. She takes the intention. She honors the effort. But the rosary in its fullness is a covenant prayer. It seals the soul in Mary's protection. It draws down specific graces for specific needs. It opens channels of intercession that are otherwise closed. And a covenant requires both parties to come with open hands. When one hand is clenched around an unforgiven wound, the covenant cannot be fully sealed. Our Lady does not turn away from the soul. She turns away from the barrier the soul has placed between itself and the grace she is trying to deliver. That distinction, Our Lady turning away not from the person but from the barrier, is one that Padre Pio returned to repeatedly in his spiritual direction. He was adamant that the rosary is not a mechanical practice. It is not a formula that works regardless of the interior state of the one praying. He compared the souls who believed otherwise to people who held an umbrella over their heads while standing in a closed room, and then complained that they were getting wet from above. The umbrella, the rosary, is real. The protection it provides is real. But the room must be open to the rain of grace for the umbrella to serve its purpose. The sealed room of the resentful heart keeps grace out just as effectively as it keeps the prayer in. This is where I have to tell you something about my own experience, something I have never fully articulated before. For many years of my life, I was one of those people. I prayed the rosary faithfully. My mother had given me my first set of beads when I was 7 years old, and there was almost no evening of my adult life when they did not pass through my hands. But for a particular period of about 6 years, I was carrying something toward a member of my husband, Robert's family, that I have mentioned in other contexts. And during those years, something about my rosary felt different. I could not have explained it at the time. There was a hollowness to it. I finished each decade and felt, not peace exactly, but the absence of what I expected. Like lighting a candle in a room and finding that the light did not quite reach the corners. I increased the number of decades. I added meditations. I said the Fatima prayer more carefully. Nothing seemed to fill the hollow. It was only much later, after I understood what Padre Pio had taught about the counter-prayer of the heart, that I recognized what had been happening. My rosary had been prayed sincerely. Our Lady had received what she could receive. But the full covenant seal, the full protective grace that the rosary at its best delivers, had not been able to close because one of my hands was clenched. The night I finally released what I was holding, and I will describe exactly what I did in a moment, my rosary changed. I cannot describe it in a way that does not sound sentimental, but it is true. It felt like the room opened, like something that had been muffled became clear, like the light from the candle reached the corners for the first time in years. Now I need to tell you about the second historical case that the Vatican investigation surfaced, because it deepens the mystery in a way that I find both disturbing and ultimately hopeful. In 1961, a family came to San Giovanni Rotondo, A mother, her two adult daughters, and one of the daughters' husbands. They had travelled from Bari, which was not a trivial distance in those years. They came because the family was in crisis. The husband, we know him from the documents as Giorgio, had been suffering from a serious illness for 2 years. The doctors had not been able to diagnose it precisely, but it was worsening. The family had been praying intensely. The mother and daughters had formed a prayer group in their parish specifically to pray the Rosary for Giorgio's healing. They had offered masses. They had made a pilgrimage to Loreto. They were, by any external measure, doing everything a Catholic family could do, and Giorgio was not improving. The older of the two daughters managed to obtain a brief meeting with Padre Pio, and she put the situation to him plainly. She asked, "We are praying. We are doing everything we know. Why is God not answering?" Padre Pio looked at her for a moment. The friar present at this meeting documented what followed in detail, because it was unusual even by the standards of Padre Pio's often unusual encounters. He asked the daughter, "In your prayer group that prays the Rosary for Giorgio, is there anyone among you who has not forgiven someone?" The daughter said she did not know. He said, "Find out. There is someone in the group carrying hatred toward a family member, and the Rosary being prayed for Giorgio is being offered through that hatred. It cannot land where it is intended to land. The grace is being deflected." The daughter returned to the family, and they discovered, after much painful honesty, that the mother, Giorgio's mother-in-law, had carried for over a decade an unresolved resentment toward her own brother over a property dispute. She had prayed the Rosary in that group every week. She was the most faithful member of the group, the most consistent in attendance, the most devoted in her recitation. And she had been, without knowing it, compromising the prayer of the entire group with the counter-prayer of her unclosed wound. The mother, confronted with this revelation, did not deny it. She wept. She went to confession that same day, and with the help of the priest at San Giovanni Rotondo, she began the work of interior forgiveness that, as she described in her later testimony submitted to the investigation, took her 3 weeks to complete fully. 3 weeks of prayer, of returning to the wound, of offering it to the cross, of releasing the claim she had held for a decade. At the end of those 3 weeks, Giorgio's condition began to improve. Whether there is a direct causal link, I cannot say with certainty. The investigation noted the timing but drew no definitive conclusion. But what Padre Pio said, and what the friar documented, stands on its own as a teaching regardless of the medical outcome. A prayer offered through hatred cannot fully reach its destination. Here is the moment in this video where the plot twist arrives, and it is one that Padre Pio emphasized again and again because it is the piece that most people miss. The Rosary is a weapon, as Padre Pio himself said many times, using those exact words, but a weapon can be carried by either side. The same beads that protect can, under certain conditions, become something else entirely. Not in God's intention. He does not use our prayers against us, but in the spiritual mechanics of how prayer functions. There is something Padre Pio described as the reversal of the blessing. He taught that the mouth which blesses while the heart simultaneously curses or withholds mercy, which is a form of cursing, produces a spiritual dissonance that does not go unnoticed in the realm of grace. He said that the Hail Mary prayed in hatred is not simply a neutral act, it is a contradiction. It asks Our Lady to be full of grace on the one hand, while the heart, on the other hand, withholds grace from a neighbor. And Mary, who is the channel of all grace, cannot be the instrument of a prayer that contradicts the nature of grace itself. She does not punish, she does not condemn, but she cannot deliver grace through a channel that is simultaneously draining it away. This is the blessing-curse reversal that Padre Pio taught. The Rosary said in authentic love, even imperfect love, even love that is still growing, multiplies grace, seals protection, draws down miracles. The Rosary said in hatred, Even sincere, well-intentioned hatred that considers itself justified diminishes grace, leaves the soul partially unprotected, and sometimes, Padre Pio warned, draws to the surface the very spiritual attack it was meant to repel. Not because God is cruel, but because the spiritual law of correspondence, that which you hold toward your neighbor, you hold between yourself and God, is as consistent and as inexorable as any law of the natural world. I want to be careful here, because Padre Pio never taught fatalism about this. He was not saying that one moment of anger during the Rosary destroys everything. He was not saying that imperfect prayer is useless. What he was describing was a pattern, a sustained habitual state of carrying unforgiven hatred while simultaneously performing the outward practice of devout prayer. That combination, held over months and years, is what he called the pure sacrilege. Not because the intention is corrupt, but because the heart's hidden practice contradicts the love that the Rosary is meant to express and receive. Let me tell you now what Padre Pio actually taught his penitents to do when they discovered themselves in this situation. Because the teaching is not only a warning, it is a remedy, and the remedy is both practical and beautiful. He called it the preparation of the heart before the beads. He taught that the Rosary, properly prayed, should be preceded, even if only briefly, by what he called an honest opening. Not a lengthy examination of conscience, not a spiritual retreat, not a complex preparation that most people would abandon after 2 days, but a genuine, honest, brief interior act that he broke into 3 movements. The first movement he called the seeing. Before you pick up the beads, he taught, close your eyes for 30 seconds, no more, and allow to surface any face, any name, any memory that carries a residue of unresolved pain. Do not hunt for them. Simply be still and observe what rises. Most people find that something rises without difficulty. The person who wronged you, the wound that never fully healed, the resentment you have been managing. The seeing is simply the honest acknowledgement that it is there, not a condemnation of yourself, not a performance of guilt. Simply, I see this, it is there. I am not going to pretend it is not. The second movement he called the placing. Having seen the wound or the resentment, you place it deliberately as a conscious act at the foot of the cross before you begin. You say in your own words, this is here. I cannot resolve it on my own. I place it at your feet before I pray. I am not asking you to remove the pain, only to hold what I cannot hold alone while I come to you in prayer. Padre Pio said that this act, brief, honest, and genuine, opens the hand that was clenched. Not fully, not permanently, but enough for the prayer to rise, enough for the channel to partially open, enough for Our Lady to receive what you bring with something less than a closed fist. The third movement he called the offering of the Rosary itself as an act of mercy. Instead of praying the Rosary for your own intentions first, he suggested, at least occasionally, and particularly when you know you are carrying a wound, to offer the first decade of the Rosary explicitly for the person you have not forgiven. Not as a performance, not as a spiritual teeth-gritting exercise, but as a genuine, if unwilling, extension of mercy toward that soul. He said something that I find extraordinary when I reflect on it, that the Hail Mary prayed for the person you hate most is the most powerful Hail Mary you will ever say. Because it costs you something, because it runs against the grain of the natural self, and because it is, in that precise sense, the most complete imitation of what Christ did from the cross when he prayed for the very people whose hatred had nailed him there. When I discovered this teaching, and I discovered it slowly in pieces over years of reading and reflection, I began to change how I approach the Rosary. I will not claim I do it perfectly. I have evenings when I am tired and the preparation is cursory. I have evenings when something rises during the seeing, and I note it and move on without fully placing it. But I also have evenings when I take those 30 seconds seriously, and when I offer the first decade for the name that rose in the stillness. And on those evenings my rosary is different, quieter, deeper, as if the room is open and the light reaches the corners. Now I want to bring you to a passage in Padre Pio's correspondence that I believe is the key to everything we have discussed today. It comes from a letter he wrote in 1924 to a woman who had been his spiritual directee for several years, a woman who struggled intensely with resentment toward a member of her parish who had publicly humiliated her. The woman wrote to Padre Pio asking whether she should stop praying the rosary until she was able to truly forgive. She felt that praying it while still angry was hypocritical, and she was considering abandoning the practice until she reached the point of genuine interior peace. Padre Pio's response to her is among the most frequently cited passages in the documentation of his spiritual direction. He wrote, and I am translating from the Italian as faithfully as I can, "Do not stop praying the rosary. Do not ever stop, but pray it differently. Pray it honestly. Begin each time by telling Our Lady exactly where you are. I am angry. I am wounded. I have not yet been able to forgive. I come to you not with a healed heart, but with a heart that wants to be healed. Take what I have and transform it. She will. This is her particular gift and her perpetual occupation. She takes the broken prayer, the imperfect offering, the prayer that comes through clenched hands, and she brings it before her Son. But bring her the truth of where you are. Do not bring her a performance of peace you do not yet possess. She knows the difference, and she prefers the honest wound to the beautiful lie." That passage has accompanied me for years, because it lifts something that could become a burden, the sense that one must be spiritually perfect before praying, and replaces it with an invitation that is both demanding and merciful. Come as you are, but come honestly. Tell Our Lady where you are. Do not pretend, and then let her do what she does. I want to add something here from my own experience, because I think it makes this teaching real in a way that abstract theology cannot. When I first encountered Padre Pio's letter to that woman, I read it 3 or 4 times, and each time I read it, something in me relaxed that I had not realized was tense. Because for years I had believed, in some unexamined corner of my faith, that prayer required a certain interior condition before it could be valid, a kind of spiritual cleanliness that I rarely felt I fully possessed. And so, on the evenings when I was angry or grieving or carrying something dark and tangled in my chest, I would pray the rosary quickly, almost apologetically, as if I was sneaking into a formal dinner in everyday clothes and hoping not to be noticed. Padre Pio's letter ended that. He was not saying, "Come back when you are clean." He was saying, "Come in whatever clothes you are wearing, but tell Our Lady exactly what you are wearing and why, and let her decide what to do with it." That is not a reduction of the sacredness of prayer. It is its deepest form, because God, who knows everything about us, asks for nothing more and nothing less than our honest presence. This is the distinction that Padre Pio spent a lifetime trying to communicate, and that the Church rarely articulates from the pulpit with sufficient precision. The sacrilege he warned against is not the rosary prayed by the imperfect soul. It is the rosary prayed by the soul that refuses to acknowledge its own imperfection. The woman who leads the Thursday rosary while maintaining a years-long contempt for her sister, and who has no awareness that this might matter spiritually, and who would be offended if you suggested it, she is in a different position than the woman who prays through clenched hands while whispering to Our Lady, "I'm not there yet, but I want to be." One is performing, one is praying. Padre Pio saw the difference immediately. He always did. There is one more thing I need to tell you before I bring this to its close. It involves something that Padre Pio said in a group teaching at San Giovanni Rotondo, not in the confessional, but in a more open setting, to a group of women who had come on pilgrimage from northern Italy in 1955. One of the women in the group later wrote an account of the visit for the local Catholic newspaper of her diocese, and portions of her account were preserved and referenced in the investigation documents. She writes that Padre Pio spoke to the group about the Rosary and that he said something that stayed with her for the rest of her life. He said, according to her account, that the most powerful moment in any Rosary is not the recitation of the Hail Marys, important as those are, and it is not the meditation on the mysteries, profound as those are. It is the moment between the Our Father and the Gloria, when the soul, if it is praying truly, briefly holds before God the full reality of what it is, broken, wounded, imperfect, and still here, still praying, still reaching. He said Our Lady gathers those moments, those specific, honest, aching moments when a person who is not yet fully healed continues to hold the beads and continues to ask. He called them the most beautiful beads on the Rosary, the ones that are prayed in honesty, from the wound, without pretense. I think of that often when I pray. The most beautiful beads on the Rosary are the ones prayed in honesty, from the wound, without pretense. If that is where you are tonight, then you are exactly where Our Lady wants you. Now let me give you something practical to take away. Not a theory, but something you can do tonight when you pray. Before you begin, sit quietly. Light a candle if you have one nearby, or simply close your eyes before your crucifix or your image of Our Lady. Spend 30 seconds in the seeing. Let whatever is there rise without forcing anything. A name, a face, a memory, a tightness in the chest. Notice it without judgment, then place it explicitly before the cross. I see this. I bring it here. I cannot resolve it on my own, but I will not hide it from you. Then make the intention for your rosary. I offer this rosary in part for the healing of my own heart, and in part for the soul of the one I have not yet fully forgiven. And begin. Pray normally. Pray the mysteries. Pray the Hail Marys with whatever attention you can muster. But begin differently, and notice at the end whether something feels different, whether the light reaches further into the room. Padre Pio promised one thing about this practice, and Father Agostino recorded it. He said that the rosary prayed with honest preparation, even if the heart is not yet fully healed, begins to heal the heart. Not instantly, not dramatically, but the way water works on stone, consistently, gently, with the certainty of eventual transformation. Every rosary prayed in honest love, even imperfect and wounded love, moves the stone, not because of what you feel, but because of what you offer. And Our Lady, who knows the difference between a performance and a prayer, receives the honest offering and brings it where your own effort cannot yet reach. If this reached you today, there is something I want to ask you. This channel, everything you have heard from me across these weeks, exists because someone decided that these testimonies of Padre Pio's spiritual teaching deserve to reach people who are struggling, people who pray faithfully and wonder why their prayers seem hollow, people who carry wounds they have not named and cannot resolve on their own. The Super Thanks button below this video is a way for you to say, keep going. Keep researching these archives. Keep bringing Padre Pio's actual teachings to people who need them. Not watered-down versions, not comfortable summaries, but the honest, sometimes difficult, always merciful truth that he spent his life communicating. Every contribution helps this continue. And if Padre Pio's own words are true, that those who spread divine truth are guardians of grace for souls they will never meet, then what you do here is not small. It is part of something that extends far beyond this screen. Now I want to ask you directly, because this is the kind of question that is better answered in a community than in private silence. Have you ever sat down to pray the rosary while still angry at someone and felt partway through that the prayer was going nowhere, that it was words and beads and nothing more? Have you ever finished the full rosary and felt emptier than when you started? Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you were carrying that evening. Tell me whether you understood at the time what was happening, or whether you understand it only now, looking back. Because what Padre Pio said in that confessional in 1953 to the woman who had led the Thursday Rosary for 11 years is for everyone here as much as it was for her. You are not praying the Rosary wrong, but you may be praying it through something that needs to be placed at the cross first. And the difference between a rosary prayed through a closed hand and a rosary prayed through an open one is, according to Padre Pio, the difference between the prayer that falls and the prayer that rises all the way to the throne of grace. Open your hands tonight. Our Lady is waiting.